For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to the Gist on Strat News Global. Good evening, I'm Surya Gangadharan, and our subject for this evening's discussion is China, notably the protests that have galvanized that country over so many days. Now, over the last 28 to 48, 24 to 48 hours, it appears the protests are abating. Although we do hear of police putting up barricades in cities like Shanghai and Beijing. Also, there are reports of police checking the mobile phones of people, especially young people, in the metros. Clearly looking to see if there are any texts there that could indicate people attending protests or taking part in demonstrations or sending messages of support. So clearly, the authorities appear to be getting back in control, although it's still early. You never know how these things go. So I have with me from Taiwan, senior research fellow Shikha Aggarwal. She is based in Taiwan. She is a research fellow at the National Chengchi University and studies China and Taiwan closely. These are both Chinese societies. Shikha, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, pleasure being here.
So, Shikha, the protests appear to have tapered down. We're not hearing of any great demonstrations and all. What is your reading?
I agree with your opening remarks that for now they seem to have abated because last night there was a lot of police personnel being reported from the cities across China. The city, the streets were all full of police personnel, and the barricading and everything had happened. And as you very rightly mentioned, that since morning they have been checking people's phones on the metro and everything, and even on the roads. So when you have this kind of a state push, then certainly there is going to be some sort of abatement in any sort of public activity against the state. But exactly as what you said, that it is pretty early. It is rather a developing situation, and we have seen a similar kind of thing happening in Hong Kong as well. That
Mhm.
on few days you felt that because of the state repression and everything, and the activities of the state security forces, the protests seem to have abated, but then they galvanized again. So we'll have to see what happens. Uh, it's a developing situation, as I already said it, and also we have to keep in mind the content of today's press meet that happened on
Yeah.
COVID. Uh, in that there were certain hints where the spokesperson said that there have been misinformation regarding COVID zero, which he entirely blamed on the foreign forces. But they also seem to suggest that they will streamline. They will sort of try and streamline the entire COVID zero policy, and there have been mistakes on the part of the local authorities that we would take as the typical buck passing kind of attitude that the CCP we always encounter with CCP. But when you say these things, yes, but this also shows that there is a certain kind of recognition that things are getting out of control, and
Mhm.
they might want to sort of dilute the very stringent activities which are being performed under the COVID zero policy. But at the same time, they have again resumed mass testing in Shanghai. They've increased the numbers of mass testing in Shanghai today again. So what they are saying and what they are doing on the ground, there is a difference between that. So
Mhm.
people's sentiment are going to go by what they do on the ground. So we just have to wait and watch as to how the situation unfolds in the coming days.
Mhm. Shika, you mentioned Hong Kong and the protests over there. There was a lot of violence in Hong Kong, and the authorities use very, very tough measures, including reportedly the use of gang members, gangsters, to attack activists on the streets. Did you see similar? Did you Is it your sense that there was less of that here? I mean, on the mainland?
Uh, this by far we have not seen this. But Mr. Gangadhar, we have to understand, the entire issue of any protest needs to be examined both from an academic point of view as well as, having a practical approach towards China's political realities or the CPC's political realities. Because the state's action is going to depend upon that. Now, for any political discontent or public discontent, for it to metamorphose into a revolution, and that to a successful revolution, we need two kind of things, which are extremely imperative for that. One is the emergence of a leadership, and the second one is having a certain set of demands on which everybody agrees. Now, what happened, in case one of these two elements is not there, then, no revolution first can become a revolution, and then there is no way that it will be able to succeed as well, right? So, with these protests, I mean, though it is very early to say that none of this will happen, but when we make a comparison with Hong Kong, we have to understand that Hong Kong was able to produce a leadership for the Hong Kong Revolution, if I may call it. Okay, there was a set leadership which was mobilizing the masses, and they had a very clear set of demands that they did not want the laws and everything there. So the set of demands was they were very articulate about those demands. Okay, what has happened with these protests? One, they have been rather sporadic. Secondly, we do not see any emergence of a leadership by far, though it has just been like few days. I would again reiterate the point. And more importantly, while they all are, there is an the trigger has been the COVID zero policy, certainly, and they want the COVID zero policy to go away and all of that. But if we just see, like, in Shanghai, you had demands about calling for Xi Jinping to step down, calling for CCP to step down. We did not see these kind of demands in Beijing or even in Guangzhou or Chengdu. These demands are very restricted to Shanghai. Okay, when we come to Beijing, the demands are about freedom of expression and all of that. So right now, even the demands are a bit dispersed. So until and unless you have a common agenda and a leadership in action, the any public discontent cannot metamorphose into a revolution. And if it does not metamorphose into a revolution, then the state action is also going to be proportionate to that, right? So right now we cannot draw that comparison with Hong Kong because that was a more organized form of a protest. Yeah. And then there is one more thing, and this is very important actually. When a Chinese leadership deals with protest in Urumqi, that is Xinjiang, or it deals with protests in Hong Kong, the entire psyche is a bit different. And that would be for any state. It is not just restricted to CPC, that would be for most autocratic states. Because the very idea of we and others, there you are dealing with the Xinjiang's, Urumqi's, Uyghur population. So the majority of the 90% of the Han population is behind you. When you are dealing with Hong Kong, then you are dealing with a set of people which the mainlanders already believe that they have been whitewashed by their brains have been whitewashed by the West. Okay, so again, the popular support is there with you. But now, when you are dealing with those protests in Beijing, in Shanghai, in Chengdu, then it's like, if I may say it, it's your own people rising against you. So the state has to take that into account as well.
So, do you think the use of only the people's police, their role was predominant here? One didn't see the armed police around?
To be, in some of the Western media, I did read that the People's Armed Police was there out on the roads. However, in the videos, People's Armed Police, and here for your audience, I would like to explain it a bit. People's Armed Police is something that comes under the Central Military Commission. So the
Okay.
moment the state asks your paramilitary force to control a situation, then it's a reflection of the thinking of the strategic calculus of the central leadership regarding that particular protest, and also the way of the way of dealing between paramilitary force and your regular police force, the way they deal with any particular situation is entirely different, because their training is very different. Their mindsets are different. So the moment you say that the people's armed police was there, then you are saying that it is a reflection that the CPC is seeing it as something extremely grave, and they are ready to move in the military, maybe eventually move in the military as well, because if the paramilitary force is their first line of defense, then
Yeah.
the second line of defense eventually becomes the military. But if it is the people's police, then we can say that there is still some modicum of sensibility that is there. It is your police
Okay.
force which is out on the streets controlling the people, and also the way they would be dealing with these people, the protesting
Yeah.
students and everybody, is going to be entirely different, because police forces all across the world are trained in these kind of things. So, however, while I read in some of the Western media reports that it was the People's Armed Police that was on the roads, by far the videos that I have come across are both on the Chinese social media as well as the Western social media. The personnel there, their uniform was either black or the very dark blue, which
Yeah.
appears
Yeah.
like black, which is the uniform of the civilian police force. So by far, we
Okay.
don't have any evidence that the militaries or the paramilitary forces out on the roads. It is largely the civilian police trying to control the people.
So you mentioned earlier that the COVID lockdowns appear to have triggered these protests, but some of the slogans being raised in Shanghai, down with Xi Jinping and he should resign and all that. You're saying it happened in Shanghai, which has been hard hit by the lockdowns. So is it basically a reaction against the lockdowns? Is it something deeper?
Uh, at the moment, uh, okay, for these protests, I would say that COVID zero became the foundation of the
Okay.
protest, for the foundation entity for the protest. What triggered the but these protests against COVID zero were already happening in Shanghai, and there was a lot of speculation going on before the 20th Party Congress as well, that it's going to harm Xi Jinping's chances and all of that, and absolutely nobody saw Li Qiang, who was the party secretary for Shanghai,
Yeah.
to make it to the Politburo, and he's right now number two in the Politburo, in fact. Okay, so protests were already going on. The frustration with COVID zero was already there in Shanghai. What has triggered this recent thing has been two things. First was on November 24th, I guess. I'm like, I'm not really too sure of the date, but it just happened like recently, just this week only. On November 24th, there was a fire in a high rise building in Urumqi.
Yeah.
And and there the building was closed from outside because of the COVID zero thing. So people cannot go out, people cannot run out, and people died. And now the official figures say that there were 10 people who died because of burning. But the Chinese social media is, it's overflooded with this thing that there were more than 40 people who actually died there, and the state is suppressing the information. So that became one of the, that gave people something very emotionally, something that emotionally charged them. The second thing became, and it's like, it's very funny. It was the FIFA World Cup. What happened was that COVID became a legitimacy challenge for all leaderships across the world. How the Chinese leadership dealt with this leadership challenge, and the drastically coming down now economic numbers and the lockdown and everything, that they created a narrative wherein the authoritarian model of the Chinese government, or the CPC model, was compared with the democratic model, and it was sort of put out to the public that this autocratic model is more efficient when it comes to dealing with things like these, and things like a pandemic and all of that. And this is a model that delivers, because this is a model that keeps people's voice, or people's well-being uh, well-being above any economic considerations, whereas the democracies are, because people did not want the lockdowns and coming down on the streets and taking off their masks and everything. So this model, this orderly model, was compared with the chaos of the democracies. Okay, and this was what was fed to the Chinese public for last 3 years, and they were living with this thing. The moment the FIFA World Cup enters their
Then
joining,
people saw the reality.
people saw that people were enjoying the World Cup without any mask or anything, and something like this was happening, and everybody was out on the roads and everything. You know what the C what CC, because all these, when people saw it, the Chinese media got flooded with these messages of is COVID only happening in Beijing? Are people in Qatar do not suffer from COVID? And these sort of messages. You know what CCTV did? They started taking the pan shots of the crowd at Qatar, at the stadiums, so that the fact that they were not wearing the mask was not
They
visible.
were visible.
Yeah. So this became a trigger for the people, that now they realized that they were being lied to, they were being made fools, and the Urumqi fire and people dying and all of that. So that became
So,
a big trigger.
so let me ask you this question: is the zero COVID strategy a reflection of Xi Jinping's own power, the need to show that he's the man in charge? I mean, is it also about that?
Initially, I won't say it was about that, because there is a rationale to COVID zero policy as well.
Yeah.
The first was that, see, the entire world had to go under lockdowns initially. All of us went into lockdown, so they also went into a lockdown. But what happened was that, because we are democracies and we are disorderly and everything, people still decided to come out. So there is one school of thought that believes, though we need, some medical, someone, medical specialist to sort of to claim this. By far, this has not come from the medical community, but this is a school of thought that believes that because COVID in democracies was allowed to spread to a wider
Yeah.
population, okay, it became endemic. Over here, it was not allowed to become endemic. So now, it has like completely, what should I say? They are paying back for something that they thought that
Yeah.
it would be a very good strategy, but what has happened that it has gone completely in this way for them. But the bigger problem is with the Chinese society is there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy all across the world. But because of the communication and everything, the states across the world were able to overcome this vaccine hesitancy. What happening in China, as per their official figures, as per the figures of the National Health Commission of China, 60%, only 60% of China's elderly population, and this would be people 80 and above. Only 60% of them are fully vaccinated, and only 40% have received a booster dose. That means the third dose. Okay. Now it is a rapidly aging society. If 40% of your old people are not even
Vaccinated.
vaccinated,
Yeah.
then it's a big problem for them. They will never be
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
they did not allow it to become endemic. So now the virus remains there. Okay, in the younger population can catch it and everything. 40% of your people are already not vaccinated. Okay, and then it's just the 40% who have received a booster dose. And we have seen that for Omicron, the booster dose is very important. So
Yeah.
effectively, 60% of your 60% of your elderly population does not even have a booster dose. Okay,
Yeah.
so Xi Jinping needed this policy or needs this policy to continue, because otherwise the COVID numbers would go crazy out there.
Go,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and they and the moment the COVID numbers go crazy out there and the people start dying and everything, where would their entire propaganda of the CCP system being more effective than
Yeah,
the chaos of the
collapses.
democracies? It will just go, yeah, it will just go out of the window. So what will they do? So that is there. But now, coming back to your question, that whether it is, sort of it is something that signifies Xi Jinping's authority. At the moment, it does, because if he takes this back, he's going to appear like a weak leader. And
Yeah.
yeah, no leadership can afford to appear weak, even in democracies, but more so in authoritarian regimes. They cannot
But
appear. Yeah.
Mhm. But would you say that all these things are happening just weeks after he got his third term? Just weeks after the party congress, and either they were not able to anticipate, or they were not able to control for some time. I mean, these things are happening just after his anointment for a third term. Does that also reflect on his presidency, on his handling of this crisis?
Yeah, this is a bit, and this is the reason that why the Chinese leadership also believes that this is some form of a color revolution. That is, this is something that has been initiated by the West because of the timing of the entire thing. But I'm not too sure of this, because how could it? Nobody would have anticipated that the live telecast of a football match
Yeah.
is going to trigger a revolution in your country. Nobody thinks
Yeah.
like this. Yeah, no matter how perceptive you are, this was not something that they could have foreseen. Let's give it to them. And the fire breaking out in Urumqi, it added fuel to the fire, I would say. That became, because there
Yeah.
were videos which showed, they were actually, they would rattle you, videos of children crying because they were burning and all of that. So this is something that would sort of create the kind of mass hysteria that we are witnessing in China. It would happen in any society. So this thing was already there. So yeah, I think yeah, I really won't know about this as to how why is it happening just 3 weeks. It's a FIFA World Cup. It shouldn't have been scheduled at this point in time or something like that. I don't know. Yeah.
So, last question. Now that the protests are abating, I'm going to ask you to speculate a bit. Looking ahead, what do you expect now? Do you expect a crackdown by the police and picking up people left, right, and center? I mean, this is what authoritarian regimes do.
Uh, Mr. Gangadhar, for this, I will come back to my earlier point, that the reaction of the state is going to depend upon the trajectory of this, if I can call it the revolution. If it continues, and if a central leadership emerges, and and if they are able to, right now the protests that we have seen, they are largely restricted to Beijing, Shanghai, Chengdu, Wuhan, and Concho. So right now they're just like six. They are very important, six, seven
Yeah.
cases, but they are not like widespread all throughout China. If they become widespread, there is a central leadership that emerges. One very important thing that we have to understand is, right now the protest has it has reached the most important campuses in China, the Beijing University and the Tsinghua
Xinhua.
University. So when the elitist of your student is protesting against the state, it is a very serious situation for any leadership to be in. Okay, so that is going to be there. But herein, I would also like to bring in the dynamics of Chinese elite politics into play. What happened during 1989, that there was, yes, the military came in and the transfer road or the people and all of that. But before all that could happen, or all that happened, there we had a Chao Ziyang who was speaking for the people, though he
Yeah.
was not heard. But there was somebody who was telling Tan Xiaoping that what you are planning to do is wrong,
Yeah.
right? what we see after the 20th Party Congress, factions in any political system have a negative connotation, but in
Yeah.
authoritarian regimes, they serve a very important purpose of, ensuring checks and balances on the leadership.
Yeah.
Right now, what we have in the Politburo is a Xi Jinping echo chamber. So, who is
Hmm.
going to be the Chao Ziyang of this system? Nobody.
Yeah.
At
Good
the
point.
time
Yeah.
of 1989, there were the eight elders, though the Tang Xiaoping's word ruled because he was one of the most important elders, but at least there were eight elders. If Jiang Zemin had wanted to take this action, he couldn't have been able to if Tang Xiaoping
Yeah.
was not was not in agreement at that point in time. Uh, However, right now, the elders are completely gone. Jiang
Hmm.
Zemin didn't even attend the
Yeah.
party congress. Hu Jintao was, we all saw what
Shut it
happened.
out. Yeah. Yeah.
Tragic what happened with Hu Jintao. As far as Sun Ping is concerned, he is already, one, I think 109, if I'm not wrong. He's way too
Hmm.
old. And secondly, he actually belongs to the Xinhua faction,
Hmm.
Xi Jinping thing. So he's not ever gonna question him. And then we have Chu Rongqi, who never liked Xi Jinping, which is largely believed, but it is also has largely been reported that his wife was implicated in a lot of corruption cases, and the reason that he is not behind the bars is because he has made some sort of this thing
Hmm.
compromise with Xi Jinping. So the elders are not there, the factional representation is not there. So who is going to stop this man if he actually decides to do something? So we
Hmm.
don't know.
Okay, so there is a question from YRG. I'd like to end on that answer. Why doesn't China import vaccines? Does that reflect on the poor quality of what they made? That's the question.
Why don't they import vaccines? Because they want to they want to appear as this country which is taking lead on everything. This is a
Hmm.
system, though criticized by the West as an authoritarian system or whatever, okay, but this is a system, that is why they went in for zero COVID, because they wanted to
Yeah.
show the world. And we have to give credit to them because they have the highest population in the world, but in terms of the number of deaths, they rank 89th.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so they, in that sense, they have been successful. I mean, though they have killed people otherwise, but then in
Hmm.
this thing they have been very successful, that they have not killed them with COVID. Okay, so this thing, because they want to appear as a country that which is very self-sufficient, and for a they want to look as a country who is actually donating vaccines to other countries, and
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
some as a country which has to depend upon any sort of vaccine import. So it is largely about your national image, for the
Hmm.
international audience, and also for the domestic audience. The domestic audience has to take pride in the leadership of the CPC.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I mean, all the permutations, combinations that are at play. Well, it's not an easy country to rule, and so many people, so many diverse, and a very diverse country. Shikha Aggarwal, great talking to you. A lot of insight and perspective. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
And we'll
thanks
get
for.
back to you as hopefully if things quiet down, I expect. But you never know. As you said earlier, you never know. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling me. Thank you.
And for those of you who joined us on this conversation, thank you for that one question. You can always give more in future just chats. Do subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, Twitter, etc. Thank you and good night.